Now, traditionally, what is the 8th Division?
The 8th Division is one of the 3 juvenile court divisions of the circuit
Okay.
court. There's 8th, 10th, and 11th right now. But after this year, there will be 8th and 10th because Judge Patty James, who is the 11th Division judge, under the new plan that was approved by the Supreme Court, she will hear family law cases and the drug court. So her docket is going to then be divided between the 2 judges who are elected for 8th and 10th Division.
Ooh, so a little bigger caseload
Yeah,
there.
a little bit.
And I guess, too, for people who maybe not be familiar with the race or anything, who are you a little bit, kind of what's your background, all that kind of good stuff.
Sure. I moved to Arkansas in the 7th grade to the big giant city of Lone Oak, and we lived in the suburbs out in Furlough. And I graduated from Lone Oak High, went to U of A for undergrad, got a degree in criminal justice, and came back here, worked as a probation officer during the day, and went to law school at night.
Right on. And I guess, is this your own practice? Or?
This is my own practice, but I have always, or for a lot of my career, had multiple jobs, so this is just part of what I do. I do mostly family law and juvenile stuff here in my practice, but I'm also an assistant city attorney for the city of North Little Rock, and I handle truancy for North Little Rock School District and the Civil Service Commission. Those are my assignments for North Little Rock. I'm the public defender in Sherwood, and I'm also an attorney ad litem. I represent the best interest of children in foster care, and that contract's up in Poinsett County. So I go to Poinsett County a few times a month.
So, but dealing with a lot of the kids.
Yeah, that's what I've found that gives me the most joy in the work that I do, and my community work has also pretty much kept me engaged with children. I'm one of the children's choir directors at my church, the Watson Primary Ensemble, and I'm on the Pulaski County Youth Services Board and the outgoing president of the Women's Foundation of Arkansas, and our focus is on improving the economic status of girls and women in our state. So I've just always had an affinity for children, and early in my career as a public defender, I was assigned to juvenile court, and it just like the light bulb went off. I was like, yeah, I think this is what I want to do. But it's not a lucrative career if that's all you choose. So I've, of course, had a variety of types of experience in my legal background. But I'm looking forward to the opportunity, if elected, to get to live my passion on a daily basis.
And I figure, too, for juvenile court, you got to have a little different mindset, a special heart for that juvenile.
I think that's absolutely right, and it's not just the children; it's the children and their families. Because the court never was intended to be punitive; it's always been intended to be rehabilitative. And the focus of juvenile court is to provide services to children and their families to help them be as successful as possible.
Now, I know running in judge races is a little bit different than what people are usually used to.
Sure.
But for this office. What kind of changes that you maybe want to bring to the table? Because everybody kind of has their own little flair to it.
Sure. So the juvenile justice reform, I think in large part the Annie E. Casey Foundation's work has produced plenty of evidence that establishes better ways for us to address the outcomes of juveniles. And so the reform efforts work to look for more ways to divert kids and utilize detention less, as little as possible, where it's possible, especially for nonviolent offenders, folks who haven't had exposure to the court. It has been produced in the evidence that is more damaging to kids when they are incarcerated and they don't need to be than it is to help them. I remember in the early days, sometimes, just being in the lockup for a few minutes might change a kid's mind, but we didn't know the damage we were doing at the time. So the evidence is there now, so we can't keep doing those things. And in Pulaski County, they are making some changes. They are utilizing evidence-based assessments now that are race neutral, that help to identify what a child's level of risk is, and if they're low risk, then we can look at other ways to provide services and interventions for those kids and families. And there are other assessments that help identify what the specific needs of kids are, so that it's not just a cookie cutter approach, that we're giving individualized services to children and to their families using tools that the evidence show work, versus just kind of guessing, asking questions. Because sometimes people tell you the answers they want you to know because they're embarrassed, or they're just not sure. So that's one of the changes, to more consistently use those evidence-based assessments to make sure that we're providing the services that are specific to the children that are coming before the court and their families.
And I guess that kind of leads me into my next question here is it seems to me that, amongst just, the bench in general, it seems to be there's sort of this switch from, being very stern and we're going to throw the book at you and we're going to teach you a lesson, to now it seems like a lot of judges are sort of embracing having some compassion. How do you think that that's going to play a role, and especially in the juvenile court?
And people have different opinions about this, but I think it's critical. And I'm not going to ever just knock the way things have been done, because I haven't been in, with the exception of when I was substitute judge or special judge, to have the daily responsibility of making these decisions. But how has it helped us? So we have to try some new things if we want to see some different results. And I think compassion is part of it. There's big talk about ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. We all have them. And the more of them you have, the more likely certain things are to happen, most of those things being negative. And so if we're not considering those, then we probably aren't providing what folks need. We're just sending them down the road or throwing them away or potentially locking them up, which is not really putting them in a better situation, because very rarely is somebody incarcerated for the rest of their lives. They're eventually going to come back to society. Are we providing them with any tools that are going to help them when they reenter society? And when we're talking about children, this is our most vulnerable resource. And if we aren't responsible enough and have enough heart to consider, judges can use discretion. I'm gonna just put it like that.
Yeah.
So using some discretion and keeping in mind that what my lifestyle is or what my standard of living is may not be that for the next person. It's not reasonable to think, well, why didn't you just get that child in therapy? That doesn't occur to a lot of people. They're trying to figure out how to eat tomorrow. So I think compassion is critical. And in that vein, that's another one of the things that I'm interested in bringing to the court. Every parent didn't get that good parent gene. And even good parents have challenges. Well-educated, well-rounded parents have a hard time because you don't know what you're going to get. You have to raise the child that you get. But for those parents there are parents, though, who just haven't made their parenting a priority. And some who are just overworked, overwhelmed, have more children than time. I think that's an opportunity for the court to provide some tools, some practical tools for parents. And I'm not talking about anything extravagant. Simple things like, here's your calendar. This page is for you to record all the teachers' names and phone numbers and email addresses. You'd be shocked how many folks don't know those. And sometimes just a simple, hey, this is my child's parent. I know that I can't help them the way I want to, but my child is smart. And so whatever I can do to support you in helping my child, that's what I want to do. Those are things that sometimes parents haven't even thought of that they can do that helps their child. So I'm talking about small, practical tools that we can give to parents and some others to make sure that they're engaged with what's happening with their children, so that it's not just I'm telling you what's important, I'm showing you what's important to me.
And I guess, too, kind of leads me again, do you think, being on the bench, that there's a responsibility to kind of be in the community? I know there's a facet of being a judge where you have to sort of be detached to be able to rule on things, but do you think that there is a role for judges to be community figures and to maybe even educate people on, just this is how law works and this is kind of how things work in a courtroom, that sort of thing? Absolutely.
And moving forward, if we're going to be successful with the reforms that I've been talking about, or even in the DHS cases, we've got to get community buy-in. And the only way you get community buy-in is if you're in the community. And I've been a community servant for all of my adult life. I can't imagine just shutting that off because I get elected as judge. I want people to stay engaged. We can't talk about the specifics and the details and name names of what's happening in courts, but folks live in neighborhoods. They see these kids having to go to court. They know what's going on. So I think the more we can educate our community about what's happening out there, the more we can engage people to be the village that a lot of us grew up in, and to care about more than what's happening just in your house. I've been preaching this for years that, you know, until the community has bought in to it's all of our responsibility to make our society better, I think we're still going to have these challenges. And I'm committed to, if I'm elected, I can't imagine that I wouldn't still be engaged in the community. I can't serve on all of these boards that I've been on and raise money for people. I won't be able to do that. But I definitely, I'd like to be that judge that shows up at a basketball game. Because sometimes just knowing that somebody you see in a certain light is a regular person too adds a lot of value to a child's life and or a parent's life. You know, if I can find ways that don't violate any ethical rules to engage in community activities, and a whole lot of the community that I'd say there's a fair percentage of folks that come to the court that I'm engaging with these folks in my church or in the neighborhood or in some other organization that I'm a part of, and I wouldn't want them to not see me now. Right. If I'm elected, I want them to know that I still care about what's going on with you. I still want you to be successful.
Just the job changed.
That's all.
I guess too, just for people who may not understand, how much different is juvenile court from just regular old court that we're all accustomed to, you know, what we think in our head?
There's a whole juvenile code. There's a criminal code, traffic code. There's a juvenile code. And, you know, it's part of the major laws, but we have different names for hearings, like the plea and arraignment that you're used to in adult court. It's just called plea in juvenile court. The trial that you're used to in adult court, it's called an adjudication in juvenile court. When the judge sentences you in adult court, that's called disposition in juvenile court. And the options of things that the judge can do, those are dispositional alternatives, and they vary considerably from what the adult court options are. There are rules about when hearings must be held. If a child is in detention, there are rules about when that child must see a judge again. Or if the child is detained as a dispositional alternative, there are rules about when that child must be seen and that detention reviewed. So there are lots of different nuances in juvenile court than there are in adult court. If a criminal case is filed against a person in adult court, very often they get arrested. They may be in jail and see a judge, get a plea and arraignment and a trial date, pay a bond to get out. And then the prosecutor, if it's a felony, the prosecutor files something called a felony information. Well, in juvenile court, if a child gets arrested, sometimes they get a citation. And they think, I got to go see the judge. Well, that's actually an invitation to have a meeting with the intake officer. And the case might get diverted. Right. That's before you see a judge. Or if a child gets arrested and is put in detention, I've already told you, they've got to be seen by a judge in a certain period of time. And then there has to be an adjudication, a plea and adjudication within a 2-week time frame. They don't have those same time frames in adult court. And if the child's charges go before the judge, that's because the prosecutor files what's called a petition. And that petition has to be served on the juvenile and the parent. Not the same in adult court. So there are lots of different things that happen in juvenile court that are part of the normal process down there that don't happen in adult court. So it is different.
Right. I'm Joe Q voter. I guess why should I vote for Tjuana Byrd?
Joe Q voter, you should vote for Tjuana Byrd because I have 24 years of experience, more than 15 years specifically, including juvenile matters. I've heard as a special judge all of the types of cases that come before the court, and I've represented children in every type of case that has come before the court. I've even represented some parents in some DHS cases. I am committed to this work. I ran before in 2012, and I ran unsuccessfully. And I think one of the questions they asked was, what are you going to do now? I'm going to keep doing the work. This is the work that I'm committed to do. I don't see it as just a job. It's a ministry. I have the experience, I have the heart, I have the commitment, and I have the work ethic to do what's going to be required when these changes that I've told you about happen, to get it done. And I think, I'm plugged in enough to the community that I think people will hear me when I talk about how we need folks to engage, how we need to partner with community organizations and churches and whoever, sewing clubs, book clubs, to plug children in to places so that they can develop their skills and talents and not have a reason to come back to the court.
There you go.
That's why.
I guess to kind of switching gears a little bit here, these are races that are largely just kind of forgotten about, are the judicial races. There's an abnormal amount being voted on this cycle here. Have you noticed that people just kind of don't seem to keep up with the judicial things as fervently as they do maybe on the legislative end?
Well, and to me, that's not so unusual, because if you're not a lawyer or you're not somebody who's frequenting court all the time, you just don't think about it. You know laws are made, so you've got a legislator up there in Washington or here in our state trying to make laws or change laws. But if you're not, there are even lawyers who are like, now when is the election? Now who's running? Because it's a lot. So I am finding and have found that I've spent just as much time trying to educate people about how the judiciary is set up in our state, why this matters, why you should care about who gets elected, and how to find the information on all of the candidates so you can make an informed decision. So I don't feel like it's so unusual that people don't know. It's just hard on us because we want people to vote all the way down the ballot. And the perfect example that I've been giving is when we had the mayoral race a couple of years ago. There was a runoff. Well, there was also a judicial runoff on that ballot. There were 22,000 undervotes. 22,000 people who cast the ballot for mayor didn't vote in the judge race at all, most likely because they either didn't know, I don't know those people, I just left it blank. We can't afford that to happen this time because there's 6 judge races on this ballot in the circuit. And then there's a Supreme Court race and a state district court race for Little Rock Traffic Court. So, it's important to us that people become as educated as they can. I'm encouraging people to go ahead and pull off your ballot now. Go out there, get your ballot, look at it, see what's on there. Try to see what you can find out about the folks that you'll get to vote for so that we don't have 22,000 undervotes in the judge races.
You want 2 shots?
No, we don't care about all that. Perfect.